For years, neither the Royal Canadian Mounted Police nor the Canadian government put a lot of effort into solving these cases.
We have 10 stories for you today. Each tale is a gripping journey through the most baffling disappearances in history. These narratives will leave you questioning reality. Number 1. The Boys from Hannibal. On May 9, 1967, 11-year-old Joel Hogue and his 13-year-old brother William came home covered in mud. The brothers are 2 of 11 children living in Mark Twain's hometown, Hannibal, Missouri. When their parents ask why they're so muddy, the boys explain that they are exploring some cave. Their parents scold them, and the next day, when they want to go out and play, they are told they are not allowed to leave the backyard. However, the 2 Hogue brothers leave the backyard. Firefighters last see the brothers heading towards a cave on the south side of Hannibal with shovels and a flashlight. What were they planning to discover in those dark depths? When the family does not find the boys in the backyard, they search the neighborhood for them. They are not located in the neighborhood, so they contact the police, and a more extensive search is launched. Around the same time that the police start searching for the Hogue brothers, the parents of another boy in Hannibal realize that he is missing. 14-year-old Craig Dowell is an acquaintance of the Hogue brothers, and a few witnesses think they see him with the Hogues as they walk toward the cave. The searchers face 2 problems. The first is that the caves are a series of tunnels with several deep pools of water and steep drop-offs. The second problem is a cave-in in the area where the boys were last seen due to nearby construction. The initial conclusion is that the boys get trapped in the tunnel after the cave-in. Expert cave searchers and skin divers from around the country come to Hannibal and help search for the boys for 38 days, but no trace of them is ever found.
I felt like they would be cold and they'd be hungry, and I just couldn't let myself do anything.
39 years after the disappearance, a construction project caused a new entrance in the tunnel and somehow painted an arrow on one of the walls. The families hope it is a tunnel that has yet to be searched. The tunnel is searched, but the 3 boys have no trace again. Since no trace of the boys' bodies or any other equipment that they had with them on the day that they went missing has ever been found, what could have happened to them? It has led to some speculation that the boys are not in the tunnels at all and that they were kidnapped instead. However, again, there is no physical evidence to back up that theory, and the boys' whereabouts remain a mystery. 2. The mysterious disappearance of the Inuit people. During the harsh Canadian winter of 1930, fur trapper Joe LaBelle searches for shelter from falling snow and bitter cold. He is close to Lake Anjikuni in the Northwestern Territory and knows an Inuit settlement is in the area. As he stumbles into the village, he notices how eerily silent it is. On previous visits, Joe had been greeted by a warm and bustling community. He hopes to find lodging, but soon realizes the place is entirely deserted. Joe finds abandoned huts, smoldering fires, meals left out uneaten, and personal possessions and weapons left intact. As he continues to search, it becomes clear that the people of Lake Anjikuni have vanished. Something has happened that forced the entire community to abandon their homes. Just as disturbing is that every single dog in the village appears to have starved to death.
Pieces of the story can be found in works such as Whitley Strieber's Majestic, Dean Koontz's Phantoms, and Stephen King's Storm of the Century.
I suspect something terrible has happened, and I know the Inuit community would never leave behind valuable commodities for no reason. Joe hikes a few miles to the nearest telegraph station to alert the authorities. Hours later, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, arrive. As they travel to the village, they're joined by trapper Alman Lauren and his 2 sons, who give a curious account of what they had seen a few days earlier. They claim to have witnessed an airborne object heading toward Lake Anjikuni that appeared to change shape as it moved. If that wasn't strange enough, when the Mounties search the village and see what Joe had described for themselves, they make another extraordinary discovery. Every grave has been opened and emptied in the graveyard, with the headstones neatly stacked on the side of the plots. How could a community of around 30 men, women, and children disappear without a trace, taking their dead with them. The Mounties immediately order a search party for the missing villagers, but fail to find anything. They do, however, discover a tied-up pack of dogs on the outskirts of the village that had died of starvation before being covered by the snow. They also state they witnessed strange, pulsing lights in the sky above Lake Anjikuni. Although it's worth pointing out these could have been the Northern Lights, the officers claimed they were not like the natural phenomena they were used to seeing. After a long and arduous investigation, the RCMP officers used berries found nearby to determine that the villagers had been gone for almost 2 months. However, it was apparent from the smoldering fires and repaired food that someone else had been using the village after they fled. The RCMP eventually concluded the disappearance was a seasonal or permanent abandonment given the nomadic nature of the Inuit people. However, they note it was odd for them to leave their weapons and provisions behind. As for the lights and craft witnessed, while they were never explained, for many, this left a lot of unanswered questions, and several did not believe this explanation, leaving the case wide open to speculation.
In the story, LaBelle mentions an evil spirit called Tornrark, hinting that this entity could be responsible for the village's disappearance.
The most popular theory is that the Inuits were the victims of a mass alien abduction, and the strange aircraft and lights back this up. Others believe some evil spirit was responsible, possibly a Wendigo, the evil spirit said to inhabit the forests and Great Lake regions of Canada and America, known to invoke feelings of insatiable hunger and the desire to cannibalize other humans and those that fall under its influence. Others believe the Inuit sky god Tungarisuk was responsible. Another popular theory is that the village members were somehow pulled into another dimension. Number 3. Leslie Julie Timothy Guthrie. In early 1977, what secrets and mysteries were about to unfold? Leslie Guthrie, 29, and her husband, Tim Sr., lived apart. Tim Sr. resided in Katona, New York, while Leslie stayed with her mother and the couple's 2 children in nearby White Plains. Despite their separation, they maintained an amicable relationship. At 1:30 in the afternoon of February 5, 1977, Leslie picked up her 6-year-old daughter, Julie, and her 3-year-old son, Timothy, from their father's home.
Me and Julie Guthrie. I helped her put the kids in the car, and they drove off. And that was the last I saw them.
They departed in Leslie's 1974 green Ford Maverick with a white roof. Sadly, this would be the last time any of their family members saw them, and even after over 40 years, their car remains undiscovered. Initially, the police suspected the car might have crashed into one of the nearby lakes along the highway connecting Katona to White Plains, possibly submerging the vehicle. However, historical weather records indicate that the winter of 1977 in that part of New York was cold enough for the lakes to have frozen, allowing a car to drive on the ice. Could this chilling scenario explain their disappearance? Another theory emerged, suggesting that Tim Sr. might be responsible for their disappearance since he was the last person to see them alive. However, the police quickly ruled him out as a suspect. In the following years, he expended his life savings on hiring private investigators and personally pursuing leads and tips. The possibility arose that, since neither their bodies nor the car were found, they might still be alive and had chosen or been forced to disappear. Just a year after their disappearance, a tabloid newspaper ran a story about a hermit living in Utah near the Arizona border with multiple wives. One of the women in a picture accompanying the story bore a resemblance to Leslie, and the caption identified her as Leslie. Tim Sr. and a detective flew to Utah to investigate, but by the time they arrived, the hermit and his wives had already left the area, and their whereabouts remained unknown. Over the past 40 years, there have been several sightings of Leslie, but none of them have been confirmed, and there have been no sightings of the children. As of the time of this video, if they are still alive, Leslie would be 69, Julie would be 46, and Timothy Jr. would be 43. 4. The Gil Family Disappearance. The Gil family lived on La Candelaria Estancia, Argentina, where Menco Gil worked as a ranch hand, and his wife, Margarita, worked at the local school. The estancia, or ranch, covered around 500 hectares and was located in a town close to Parana on land belonging to Alfonso Goyetti, also Menco's boss. On January 13, 2002, the family traveled 30 kilometers to Tavalier to attend the wake of their friend Maximo Vega. This was the last time anyone saw the family. Menco, 56 years old, Margarita, 26 years old, and their children Maria, 12, Osvaldo, 9, Sofia, 6, and Carlos, 2, disappeared off the face of the earth. What could have transpired during that fateful trip? I'll tell you. In mid-March of that year, Menco's brother Otto tried to contact the family but got no response. Then, his sister, Luisa, traveled to her brother's home but again got no response. Then, in June, Alfonso Gayati showed up at Luisa's house asking where the family was, saying he was concerned they had not returned from a 3-month vacation. He even suggested that they could be staying with relatives in Santa Fe or that perhaps they had traveled to look for another job in the north. Luisa was suspicious of this explanation, as previously Gayati had only ever given them a maximum of 10 days leave, and after checking with friends and neighbors, they were all unaware that they had planned a trip. It was also revealed that Margarita had not picked up her latest salary. Luisa reported the disappearance to the police. However, initially, they leaned toward the hypothesis that the family had indeed gone on vacation and perhaps found another job and not returned. Another relevant fact is that the family's cell phone of the company CTI continued to be active until April 2003, 15 months after the disappearance. It took until July 2003, 18 months after their disappearance, for police to investigate and search the area, but they found nothing. In the following years, investigators interviewed several people, searched various areas, and handed out missing person flyers, but nothing was found. In 2008, the fields in the area were excavated, wells were dug out, the family home floor was raised, and traces of blood were found using luminol. However, the samples did not show Gil's genetic pattern, although experts clarified that the samples had been contaminated over time. Nothing much happened for the next 8 years until on June 16, 2016, Alfonso died in a traffic accident. Alfonso's death produced an unexpected twist in the case. Armando Nani, a rural contractor who carried out planting work in the Goyati field and knew Menco Gil, came forward. Nani hadn't wanted to speak before out of fear of Guthrie, but with Goyati dead, he made an extraordinary claim. He said that the Gils did not go on a trip to find work elsewhere. They were buried in the area. He claimed that 20 days before the family disappeared, Menco Gil dug 2 wells, one in the dry stream bed. What could have led Menco to dig those wells? With this new information, investigators began excavating the 2 wells in October 2017. However, just 2 weeks later, they abandoned the dig. The first well did contain bones, but they belonged to animal remains. The second well, now filled with water, posed a significant and costly problem, and additional funding needed to be approved by the judicial branch. Subsequently, the excavation stopped, and the field was planted with soy and returned to its ordinary purpose. The last thing that was known is a report produced by firefighters that surveyed the watercourse and provided a fact. The land had been removed previously, which would indicate previous disturbances or digging. And that is where the investigation stands today, nearly 20 years after an entire family disappeared. Their fate remains unknown, and the mystery rolls on. 5. Dalcia Follett. On July 29, 1965, 3 armed men stormed into a bank in Gothenburg, Sweden, dressed in women's clothes with blonde wigs. One of the robbers watches the door, while the other 2 enter the bank, firing wildly into the ceiling, causing employees and customers to scurry for cover. One customer does not flee, but instead attempts to wrestle the gun away from one of the robbers, resulting in the robber shooting himself in the leg. What would drive someone to confront armed criminals like that? After robbing the bank, they run to a nearby river and discard their disguises. Underneath the women's clothes, they wear wetsuits. The plan involves jumping into the water and swimming in a getaway boat, but they're all arrested before reaching the ship. Later that night in Gothenburg, 16-year-old Kjell Johansson's family worries when he doesn't return home. Over the next several days, the families of 22-year-old Gay Carlson and 21-year-old Jan Olof Jalso also notice their absence. The three young men are acquaintances and work together. Months later, authorities realized they were all together when they went missing. They were all seen in a midnight blue 1956 Volvo PV 444 on the day of the robbery. The young men in the car have never been found. However, the story takes a bizarre turn. In July 1965, Hubner Lundquist was hitchhiking from Skåne to Lysekil, and when his parents didn't hear from him after a few weeks, they contacted the police. The last communication the Lundquist family receives is a postcard mailed from Gothenburg on July 29th, the same day as the robbery and the disappearance of the three young men. Is it just a coincidence that Lundquist vanished on the day of the theft? This has led to speculation that the four disappearances and the robbery may be connected. One theory suggests that the young men witnessed the robbers preparing for the heist and the robbers killed them to silence them. Another possibility is that the three young men were involved in the robbery and chose to disappear when it went awry. Lundquist may have either been killed by the group of six or was not affected, and his disappearance is purely coincidental. Alternatively, the disappearances of the three young men and Lundquist, along with the robbery, may not be connected at all. Perhaps the three young men were involved in a car accident in a remote area or crashed into the water, and their car has not been found. Since Lundquist was hitchhiking, it is possible that he was in the car with them. Two individuals claim to have seen Lundquist after his disappearance, but their claims remain unverified. He has neither returned home nor contacted any friends or family. Regrettably, the families of the four young men have been waiting for over 50 years to discover what happened to them, but they remain no closer to any answers. 6. Paul and Sarah Skeba. Nine-year-old Sarah Ariel Skeba lives with her mother, Michelle Russell, in Granbury, Colorado. Michelle and Sarah's fathers, Paul, are divorced. The weekend of February 5th, 1999, is Paul's scheduled visitation with his daughter at his home in Thornton, Colorado. Michelle and Paul share custody of Sarah, and she spends every other weekend with her father. Additionally, Paul devotes his time to Sarah every Wednesday and takes care of her. Paul resides with his mother, Sharon, and his on-off girlfriend, Teresa Donovan, who recently gave birth to a baby boy. Although Sharon is presently out of town, the arrangement is only sometimes harmonious due to Sharon and Teresa not getting along. It later becomes known that Paul expressed uncertainty to his mother about the baby's paternity and was planning to undergo a paternity test. He was also considering asking Teresa to move out. Paul owns Tough Movers, a company based in Westminster, Colorado, which he built from scratch. What's the significance of his successful business? On Sunday, February 7th, Sarah accompanies her father on a moving job in Morrison, Colorado. They receive assistance from one of Paul's employees, Lorenzo Shivers. The three were last seen at approximately 6 p.m. that day while performing the moving job. Unfortunately, this marks the last time anyone sees or hears from them. Teresa is the first to raise the alarm. On Monday morning, she called Paul's mother, Sharon, informing her that Paul had not returned home the previous night. He also did not return Sarah to her mother's house and failed to show up for work despite having a job lined up for that morning. Lorenzo Shivers, who lived with Teresa's sister, is also missing. Teresa calls the police department, but they do not initially take her seriously. Sometime later, Sarah's mother, Michelle, also contacted the police, notifying them that Sarah had not returned from her weekend stay with Paul. Investigators initially suspect that Paul may have abducted Sarah with Shivers' assistance, leading to a warrant for Paul's arrest. They believe that disappearances are related to a possible custody dispute. Later, investigators discovered one of Paul's vehicles abandoned in the Westminster parking lot used by his company. It is parked unusually and has been struck by 2 bullets with bloodstains present. A piece of human scalp with attached hair is found inside the vehicle, along with additional hair on the truck's fender. What kind of gruesome scene is this, and what does it mean for the investigation? Shell casings and blood are also discovered in the parking lot. There is no sign of Sarah, Paul, or Shivers at the scene. Shivers' car is also in the parking lot, but Paul's other vehicle is in Denver, Colorado. DNA tests confirm that the blood on the truck's door belongs to Paul, and the blood on the ground outside belongs to both Paul and Sarah. The piece of scalp belongs to Paul, and the hair belongs to Sarah. Authorities changed the classification of the missing persons case to endangered missing and announced their suspicion of foul play in the disappearances. They believe that Paul, Sarah, and Shivers were ambushed and killed when they returned the truck to the parking lot, with Paul being the likely target and his daughter and Shivers being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Which leads us to Paul's next enemy, Teresa's brother, Tom Donovan.
To date, no one has been charged with any involvement in the disappearances, and the remains of the three individuals have never been found. For their families, the mystery of what happened to their loved ones remains unsolved. The case remains open, and if anyone has any information, they're urged to call the Westminster Police Department at 303-430-2400. 7. The Jack Family. The Jack family of Prince George, British Columbia, comprises a young Aboriginal family struggling to make ends meet. On the night of August 1st, 1989, the family's patriarch, 24-year-old Ronald Jack, converses with a Caucasian man at a local pub. After a brief discussion, Ronald departs the pub with the man. What might this encounter reveal about their fate? Upon returning home, he informs his wife, 26-year-old Doreen, that he secures jobs for them at a logging camp out of town. These jobs reportedly include daycare services, but they must leave that night to secure them.
The prospect of 2 stable incomes and daycare for their children seemed almost too good to be true for the struggling Jack family.
Consequently, they gather their belongings and their 2 sons, 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan, into the car and set off. Around 1:30 a.m., Ronald calls his mother to share the news about the jobs, providing some details but not disclosing the camp's location. He mentions that the family will be away for 10 days to 2 weeks. Regrettably, this marks the last contact anyone has with the family. After this call, they vanished, and not even their car was located. Following their reported disappearance, the police visited their home in Prince George's, where it appears the family had intended to return soon. They then traced Ronald's call to his mother, discovering it was made 30 miles from Prince George, near Bednesty Lake. Despite this, no further clues emerge, and the case quickly goes cold. Nearly 7 years later, on January 28, 1996, the Prince George's Police Department received an anonymous call from a man whose voice was muffled and difficult to discern.
The Jack family are buried at the south end of Gordon's Ranch.
Is it regarding the Jack family?
The caller claims that the family is buried at the end of a ranch, potentially Gordy's. The police searched the mentioned ranch but found no traces of the family. They traced this call to a residence an hour from Prince George, which hosted a party on the night of the call. Partygoers deny knowledge of the caller's identity. Why would someone make such a call from a party, and why the secrecy? The location of the Jack family's disappearance suggests they may have fallen victim to foul play. They were heading west on British Columbia Highway 16, a 450-mile stretch of the infamous Highway of Tears between Prince George and Prince Rupert. Since 1969, 9 confirmed cases of missing or murdered women while hitchhiking on Highway 16 have occurred. Similar incidents have been documented on Highways 5 and 97, totaling 9 more cases, although some believe the actual count could be significantly higher, possibly in the 40s, including the Jack family. Many of the victims are Aboriginal women, and for years, both the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian government have displayed limited interest in solving these cases. Former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, in office from February 2006 to November 2015, consistently rejected calls for an inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women, stating that it wasn't a high priority for the government. Despite government indifference in 2012, the RCMP announced a suspect for some of the Highway of Tears murders, possibly connected to the Jack's disappearance. The suspect was Bobby Jack Fowler, a transient who traveled extensively through the United States and Canada for over 4 decades. In 2002, the RCMP linked Fowler's DNA to a cold case from 1974 involving the murder of 16-year-old Colleen McMillan, who had gone missing while hitchhiking on Highway 97. Unfortunately, by the time the authorities identified Fowler as her killer, he had already passed away in 2006 while serving a 16-year sentence for raping a woman he met at a bar. The question remains whether Fowler was the man seen talking to Ronald Jack on the night he disappeared. This question may never receive a definitive answer because Fowler's whereabouts in 1989 remain uncertain and authorities are still piecing together his past. Fowler lived a transient lifestyle, moving from town to town, sometimes staying for only a day, residing in rundown motels, and earning money through odd jobs. Both Canadian and American authorities suspect Fowler may be responsible for over 20 murders. However, it is not feasible for him to be the perpetrator of all the Highway of Tears murders, as at least 3 occurred after his incarceration for rape in 1996. This suggests the presence of another killer who may still be at large in the interior of British Columbia. 8. Nina.
Mother clinging to hope that this satellite image, the one you look at right there, might finally give her answers about the fate of her.
In 2013, the 85-year-old 50-foot ocean racing schooner Nina disappeared without a trace on the stormy Tasman Sea, along with its American owner, David A. Dykey III, his wife and 17-year-old son, and 4 crew members. But what could have caused this seemingly well-equipped vessel to vanish without a trace? Nina is a celebrated, well-maintained vessel that 1928 became the first American yacht to win the Fastnet race after a 600-mile sprint through the stormy English Channel. David is a commercial mariner and diver with an extensive maritime background and serves as an experienced skipper more than capable of sailing Nina under adverse conditions. He also keeps Nina in excellent working order, equipping her with a manually activated EPIRB, a spot beacon, a satellite phone, parachute flares, and IVHF radio, among other equipment. Nina leaves Apua in the Bay of Islands on New Zealand's North Island on May 29, 2013, bound for Newcastle, Australia, a 1,500-mile trip expected to take 8 to 10 days. Everything appears to go according to plan until June 4th, when contact is lost. The last contact occurs around 11:50 p.m. on June 3rd, when Bob McDavid, a New Zealand meteorologist, receives a satellite phone call from Nina crew member Evie Nemeth, who reports that the weather has turned nasty and seeks advice on escaping the storm. McDavid requests that she call back in 30 minutes after preparing a forecast, and when she does, he advises Nina to go south and heave until the swells abate, while also cautioning about strong winds and high seas. However, there has yet to be a reply from Nina. McDavid then texts Evie daily for several days and has not received a response. What could have prevented Nina's crew from responding to these vital messages? On June 12th, Evie's partner contacted Australian SAR, expressing concerns that Nina had yet to reach its destination. However, no action is taken until June 13th, when RCCNZ initiates a communications search, followed by a physical search on June 25th. Interestingly, the physical search commences far from Nina's last communicated position, relying on an Iridium satellite phone, a device with questionable position reporting capability. During this search, an undelivered text message from Nina at 11:50 a.m. on June 4th, the day Evie texted McDavid, is discovered. The message reads, "Thanks, storm sails shredded last night. Now bear poles are going 4 knots, 310 degrees. I'll update the course info at 6 p.m. This undelivered text message indicates that Nina was affected by the storm but strangely gives no immediate indication of distress. Rescuers suspend their search on July 6th after overflying 737,000 square nautical miles of ocean, marking one of the most significant searches ever conducted by the agency. Shoreline searches also yield no sign of the vessel or crew. Nothing has been found nearly 7 years since the disappearance, and no debris has washed up. All searches have come up empty. It appears likely that Nina succumbed to a catastrophic event during one of the storms that swept through the Tasman, although hopes remain that the crew may have abandoned the ship on a raft. Sadly, this was not possible.
Kind of gives me a little bit of hope where all my hope was gone.
It's worth noting that the location of the disappearance falls within the area known as the Bass Strait Triangle, a stretch of water notorious for claiming several other ships and aircraft. It is best known for the disappearance of Australian pilot Frederick Valentich, who vanished after a UFO sighting in the area. 9. Ann Miller, Patricia Blow, and Renee Bruhl. On July 2, 1966, Ann Miller, a 21-year-old, collects her two friends, Patricia Blow and Renee Bruhl, 19, from their Chicago area homes. These three women share a common bond. Their horses are stabled together. Their destination, the Indiana Dunes, an hour's drive from Chicago, along the shores of Lake Michigan. But what awaited them at that picturesque beach on that fateful day? By 10 a.m., they arrive at the beach, where the scorching sun and the long weekend draw in a massive crowd. Hours later, as the sun dips below the horizon, a young couple on the beach flags down a park ranger. They describe witnessing the three women enter the water around noon and converse with a man on a boat. This man, tanned and in his early 20s with dark, wavy hair, is seen aboard a unique boat, a 16 to 18 foot long vessel with 3 hulls, an airborne motor, a white exterior, and a blue interior. However, the woman never returned to the shore, leaving their belongings behind. Purses, shoes, and clothes are strewn across their beach blanket. The ranger collects and stores these items at the office, but they soon slip from memory due to the busy holiday weekend. 2 days pass and panic sets in when Renee Bruhl's father calls the ranger's office. Upon inspecting the belongings, the ranger discovers car keys that belong to Ann Miller's vehicle, untouched since Saturday. A call to the Chicago police reveals that Miller and her two friends were reported missing 2 days earlier.
It was one of the cases that people would call in and you would just get a detective and say, okay, I'll try to dust the book off and see what I can do in between that.
Land and water searches commence, but 48 hours have passed since the women disappeared, and the beach has seen thousands of visitors, making finding any clues near impossible. Initial theories suggest the women's boat may have sunk, but debris discovered near their last location, boat seats, oil and gas cans, and a piece of wood provide inconclusive evidence. The Coast Guard has no records of a missing boat, and the fact that 2 of the women are strong swimmers discounts the possibility of drowning. Another theory surfaces. The woman chose to disappear. Only Renee Bruhl is married, and her purse contains a letter addressed to her husband expressing discontent. Dated 2 weeks before her disappearance, the letter's purpose remains unclear. The husband claims ignorance about her unhappiness, suggesting she may have written it angrily and forgotten it in her purse. Police conclude that all 3 women had personal problems, but nothing significant enough to fake their deaths. The possibility of foul play looms large. 2 potential suspects emerge: abortionists had a connection to the stable where the women boarded their horses. Before their disappearance, Miller mentioned she was 3 months pregnant. Abortion was illegal in Illinois at the time, leading to the speculation that the women sought black market abortions from Helen and Frank Largo, a husband-wife team. The nephew of the Largos, present at the beach on the fateful day, fits the description of the man on the boat. The theory suggests the nephew ferried the women to a houseboat where abortions were performed, but something went wrong, leading to their deaths and subsequent disposal in the river. However, this remains mere conjecture, lacking any concrete evidence. The second theory relates to the stable where the women kept their horses. Patricia Blow had a facial injury 4 months before her disappearance, potentially connected to threats from syndicate members. The stable's owner, George Jane, had a half-brother named Silas Jane, Cy, who headed the notorious Horse Syndicate. a criminal network involved in insurance fraud and horse killings. Sy harbored deep resentment toward George after losing a horse competition to him in 1961. Could the sinister dealings of the horse syndicate hold the key to these women's disappearance? In 1965, a bombing at the stable resulted in the death of Cherry Rood, but Sy remained unprosecuted. Suspicions arise that the woman may have witnessed incriminating activities leading to their murder. Sy's violent history, including involvement in the murder of 3 boys in 1955 and the subsequent cover-up, adds credibility to this theory. Sy's reign of terror extended to threats and murder attempts against George, including a fatal shooting in 1970. The investigation into Brock's disappearance, a candy heiress, revealed connections to Sy's syndicate. Richard Bailey, associated with Sy's nephew Frank Jane, dated Brock and allegedly defrauded her. The police suspect that when Brock discovered the fraud, she planned to inform authorities, potentially inciting Sy's involvement in prison. Bailey was sentenced to 30 years in prison, although he denied any involvement in her murder. Despite these interconnected mysteries and the syndicate's dark history, Ann Miller, Patricia Blow, and Renee Bruhl's fate remains uncertain. The case has grown cold, leaving unanswered questions lingering in the wind. 10. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony in 1587. In 1587, English colonists established a small colony on an island off the coast of modern-day North Carolina, marking the potential first permanent English settlement in the so-called New World. During the challenging initial year of the settlement, its founder and mayor, John White, returns to England to request additional resources and people. Upon his return 3 years later, the colony mysteriously vanished. White discovers the words Croatoan and the letters CRO carved into trees within the colony's boundaries. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony is currently one of the most notorious mysteries in American history, with a lack of concrete evidence explaining its fate, leading to widespread speculation. One of the most widely accepted and well-supported theories suggests that the settlers integrated with the nearby indigenous Roanoke Hatteras tribe, who resided on an island then known as Croatoan Island. Conflict with the Roanoke Hatteras people and disease and famine may have also contributed to the colony's disappearance. Thanks for exploring these mystifying unsolved cases with us. Hungry for more details and theories?